Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we have a great one for you today. Today, we're actually connecting with someone that I'm a big fan of, that I've been following for a long time, so I'm glad I finally got him on the podcast. That gentleman is Sam Soholt. If you don't know Sam, check out the episode. Also, check out the links below. He's doing a lot of cool stuff. I don't want to ruin any of the thunder, and we'll get into it all during the actual podcast, so we'll just stop there. But for now, guys, let's go ahead and kick this thing off, and let Sam tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Sam, welcome to the Hunting Stories podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to have you. I told you before we hit the record button, but I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I'm wearing one of the shirts that you guys sell. I wear this all the time. The majority of people have no idea with Pittman, Robertson, Dingle Johnson, but that's okay. I love it. I've just been a fan for a while, so I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you following along with everything that I do and we do, and I think the reason we made that Pittman Robertson shirt is because it seems like a solid conversation starter. And so you can 100%. Actually, if people ask, you can actually explain to them like how one tool of conservation funding actually works. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's great, man. And I say, the people that ask me about it, they always think it's like, is that some sitcom shirt? Like, is that from like The Office or something? They're like, Dingle Johnson, what's that? And then I get to explain the whole thing. So right. You're right, it is a conversation starter. But let's take a small step back, Sam. Why don't we let you introduce yourself so the people who maybe don't know who you are already will learn who they're going to hear some stories from today.
Sounds good. I am Sam Soholt. I have been a professional videographer and photographer in the hunting industry since 2011. I more recently have been known for doing a lot of conservation efforts, habitat initiatives, different things surrounding conservation, and then also trying to promote more public access and protect the public access that we have. That's kind of been like the passion project over the last almost decade now. Have been just in the hunting industry for a long time. I've been able to be very lucky to travel around and create content for a lot of really cool brands in the industry. And it definitely allows me a lot of flexibility to do a lot of my own hunting as long as I'm still delivering photos and video stuff that I need to do for all of my clients. So I'm a pretty lucky guy. Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more in depth about my favorite thing that you do, which is the Stamp It Forward project. We'll maybe save some time at the end to go into that and of course my experience with it, because as long as I've been interested in waterfowl hunting, I've been making sure to take advantage of your Stamp It Forward project. So, but we'll talk about that at the end. And for now, we're just going to hear your favorite stories, brother. So why don't you set the stage? I don't know if you have any in mind. I didn't tell you to prep anything, but hopefully you have a couple that stick out in your mind.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to. Where do you want me to start? I guess
that's a tricky question. I get that question a lot, but like I don't know necessarily your hunting background or. How about this? You've gone a little bit into like your occupation, right, and what you do for your living. But like, when did you start hunting? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So I started hunting. Started tagging along on hunts when I was, 6, something like that. 5 or 6. My dad did a lot of bird hunting when we were young, and so walking CRP and cornfields and stuff like way before I could shoot a gun. I remember like there was one trip in particular, and this is like I'll just do this as one of my favorite stories. So when I was little, my dad loved pheasant hunt. I had an older brother who was 4 years older than me, and so. I think I would have been 8 because I think Josh was 12. He was actually hunting on the pheasant hunt. And so I was just tagging along to kind of learn the ropes or whatever. And before we left, we had an old Ford Bronco, and we're packing up all the gear and everything and getting the dog loaded and kennel in there and stuff the night before. And I was like, I got to grab my boots, which were hand-me-downs from my brother. And my brother was like, no, I grabbed them. And so I was like, okay. So loaded up. We drove all the way out there. I think it was like 4 hours from our house. We're going to be there for 3 days. And my brother had packed my boots, but he had packed both left boots from my old boots and then his other hand-me-down. So I had 2 left boots so that I could...
2 different sizes.
2 different sizes. Yeah, one was a little tight, but luckily the bigger of the wrong foot was I was able to wear on my right foot. So it all worked out in the end, but I got called left turn the entire week at hunting camp, and as an 8-year-old going into like a camp of like 15 guys, like, it's not a nickname you hope to have stick, but made the best out of it.
Has that stuck since, or was it just that
camp?
No,
it did. That did fade out. Yeah, but I did get a lot of crap. Even though it wasn't my fault. Well, I mean, I'll take some blame for it, but even though it was,
if you don't pack your own stuff, it's inevitably what's going to happen.
It is my
right?
fault. Yeah. So lesson learned when I was a very, very young kid.
That's awesome, man. So you've been doing it for basically your whole life, then.
Yeah, my whole life. I mean, I don't remember a time before, like even, like my dad would go out and then come back, and if he had, whether it was a deer or ducks or pheasants or whatever, it's been absolutely my entire life that I've been surrounded by it. And then, obviously, he instilled so much passion in both my brother and I that we went on to like have careers in the industry. So, I mean, Josh went to University of Wyoming so he could learn how to elk hunt, and then him and his buddy from college started Gannett Ridge Hunting Equipment, which was in Fort Collins. They ran that for about 10 years, which was all backcountry hunting gear, archery pro shop, gun counter, the whole thing, like everything from backpacks to sleeping bags to bows to what, so like his passion, my dad's passion instilled into both of us to like go chase whatever we wanted to chase. So Josh went that route, and then I went the photo video route, and then now we both own Public Land Tees, which has been kind of a cool project for us to do together as brothers over the last, I guess, 7 years now.
That's awesome. And is that based out of Fort Collins too? Is he still up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I think the last time I ordered a shirt, I was like, "What? I didn't know that Sam was based out of Fort Collins," and it turns out it was your brother. So
yeah. So Josh does all of the, I do all the sales and marketing stuff for the brand, and Josh does all of the back end work. So all of the printing of the shirts and shipping and all that stuff. So if anybody listening has bought one of our Public Land Tees, it has been made in Josh's garage or basement over the last 7 years and shipped right to your door.
That's awesome, man. That's amazing. Man, and that history of kind of where you come from, that's what I'm hoping to have for my kids. Like I told you, and my listeners already know, but like I am a newer hunter. Don't know anything about anything. I just keep going into the woods, making mistakes, and get a little bit better every day. So, but I'm hoping my son, he's 5. He'll turn 6 in January. I'm hoping to have him, with 2 left boots coming with me into the woods here shortly. So I'm hoping to instill that into my family and kind of keep that tradition going, because I think it's really important. So
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think just being immersed in the outdoors, regardless of the activity, is the way to raise your kids. I've got an 8-week-old at the moment.
Oh, hey, congratulations, man.
Yeah, thank you. So
is it your first?
First kid. Yep. She's she's turned 8 weeks yesterday.
Tired. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that and I had this sweet sty in my eye. It actually kind of got it starting to heal up today, but man, it looked like I got punched in the face the last week. So that's pretty fun. But yes, the fatherhood has been great, and like even right now, she's just a very tiny little peanut, and it's like when she gets kind of riled up or feisty or whatever, like I can walk out on the deck and walk around the backyard, and it like just calms her right down, just that fresh air. So I'm definitely, my kid will be an outdoor cat, 100%.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a little girl too, and it's funny because like my son is definitely into hunting and the concepts and what he hears me doing, but like my daughter is into it. She's 3, and she's like, Dad, I want to see the bloody pictures, and I'm like, are you sure? And I'm like, all right, well, here's the antelope. There's lots of blood in that photo, so little girls are absolutely amazing and precious, man. So congratulations. But
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, let's get back on track, man. Sorry, I don't know. You have no. It happens every episode. What other stories do you have for us? The left boot or the left turn is great. I love that story. I love nickname stories, but what else you got?
So I'll tell you my favorite deer hunting story.
Perfect.
I'll give you 2. So first is a solo, and then the second is a family trip. But the first one was we were on a family trip. But we were all hunting separate, and it was a new area to us. And there's no secret that I'm a fairly major geek when it comes to whitetail hunting, and so Josh had actually picked like the camping location. He's like, I just knew that if I sent Sam like the location where we're going to camp, then he would just like whitetail the hell out of the area and figure out like, okay, here's like, and that's what I did. Like he sent me, he's like, hey, I think we're going to camp, we're going to camp here. And like an hour later, I sent a screenshot back to the family group It was my dad and uncle and my brother. I sent a screenshot back, and I had 75 or 80 pins on different locations that should hold deer within a 45-minute drive of our camping spot. So then I was like, all right, here's the deal. Here's all the pins.
What
I'll
state,
share them all.
if you don't mind me asking?
I'm not going to say it. State of happiness.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't like talking about what states you hunt, because animals are animals. You got to go find them.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
totally
fine. I think we
fine.
need to normalize not telling people what states we hunt. We all need to do better at that.
Hey, hunters. Have you ever had one of those stories, the ones that you didn't want to tell, the ones that end in failure? Yeah, I've been there. Actually, you know what? The culprit for me usually is bad optics, or worse, lack of using my optics at all. Picture this. I spot a trophy buck, or an antelope, or an elk, whatever it may be. My heart is racing, but the blurry view, or I just can't quite identify exactly what I'm looking at, it has me second guessing. Well, that's where Vortex Optics comes in. With crystal clear glass and rugged durability, Vortex gives you the confidence to take the shot. Don't let poor optics ruin your story. Make every moment count. Upgrade to Vortex and turn your hunting tales into triumphs. Visit vortexoptics.com today. I'm a big advocate of just share the unit. You obviously don't share draws. I haven't gotten as grand as not showing the state. Usually I'm open to that, but it's a concept I'm open to.
Yeah, state of happiness is what I tell everyone.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so I said, I was like, I'll share all the pins. Basically, here what we're going to do is we're all going to leave camp in the morning, and every morning and every evening, we're all going to hunt a new spot every time. And so, unless we get into deer, if it's like we go there and they're like, oh, there's, a lot of sign, like hunt it again. But the concept was like, okay, then we can gather, 4 people's worth of intel every single hunt on different locations. And I was like, by the end of the week, even if none of us kill a deer in this first time we've been in this area, at least we'll have, it'd be like 56 new pieces of intel, by the end of the week.
Gotcha.
And so, so we went into it, and, I think we all went out and hunted, and then we'd come back. My favorite part is you go out and you hunt, and then you come back and you tell everybody else, like, okay, this is what I saw. This is what I found. Yeah. This is how this lays out. This is how the deer moved through it. And then you start to put notes on, the pins and stuff, like sit here, don't sit here, use this wind, that kind of thing.
You're piecing the story together. It's great.
Yeah, and I'm like full nerd about that stuff. So like my Onyx maps, like I wonder how many hours a year I spend on Onyx. It's probably unhealthy, but fun. Yeah. So I think it was the maybe third morning. We all busted out of camp again. I'd picked a spot on the map. It was about 45-minute drive. I didn't know. Basically, there was like 2 drainages that I could hunt, and it had a really heavy wind that day, but I didn't bring a stand or a saddle or anything. I was like, I'm just going to go in. This is like an exploratory. I can sit on this little bluff thing and kind of overlook some of the ground as the sun's coming up. And then I'll go in and I'll do like a call set and, grunt and rattle and, kind of work my way through the whole property all morning. And I got in there, I hiked in, sat down on this little bluff, and just as twilight's coming up, I see, it was probably, mid to high 160s deer, just a giant, but it was just moving off the public. It was just cruising on a mission, at about a half mile from me. And I was like, all right, well, deer are on their feet. They're up and moving. I'm just going to stick to my plan. I'm sit here for a while. Didn't see anything else. And then I was like, okay, next part of the plan, just work in, start calling my way through, still hunting my way through. Had a heads up decoy just in case I got into a situation where I could try to call one in. And
that's awesome. Not many people still hunt whitetail from what I'm not an experienced whitetail hunter, but everyone their stories are always blind, tree stand, whatever. Right. So it's fun to hear that you were going after them. That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's definitely the most common. You do a little more like if you do more like prairie whitetail stuff, like the whole center of the country, you can get away with doing a little bit more of like the still hunting because you can do like spot and stalk with a decoy or use the terrain to your advantage. Whereas if you're hunting big hardwoods, man, that's still hunting stuff. You can do it, and there's old guys that do it, really well. But like most of the time, you're working on pinches and funnels, sitting in a tree or blind. Yeah. So I was just trying to be aggressive. You only have so many days to hunt, and started working in, got down into this little drainage, and immediately there was like rubs and scrapes and stuff everywhere. So at least like you start to get a little optimistic because you're like, all right, there's lots of sign here. Like there's big rubs, it's like, I just saw a big deer, like it's just everything, like all these little factors are like, it gives you tons of hope. And so I started working down this drainage, and I would grunt a couple times, and then I would move, and then I found a scrape, and I'd, like throw leaves out of it with the boot, and, just make whitetail noises as I'm like slowly picking through the timber.
Okay.
And caught movement on left side of my eye, and I looked over, and it was just like a little forky, maybe a 3x3, little 1.5-year-old buck. And I was in the middle of the trees, which were only about, 60 yards wide.
Okay.
Well, it was moving down like the downwind edge of those trees and worked right downwind of me, and then kind of just buggered off a little bit. I had the decoy up. It was looking at me, trying to figure it out, but smelled me and just kind of like didn't blow at me, didn't nothing, just kind of like moved down. And so I was like, okay, if even the 1.5-year-old is just cruising that downwind side, like that's where I need to be. Like I need to be working that edge in case there's anything else that's working that edge. So moved like 35 yards, put my binos up, and up at the top of the little ridge above the drainage, probably like 300 yards to the south of me, was this beautiful deer, like big, perfectly typical 10-point, like tall tines, not super heavy deer, but like, when you see a deer, like an old painting of deer or whatever, like it looked like that. It was just perfect.
Okay. That's awesome.
So I got the decoy on my bow, and I was, getting ready to go. And like, I was like, okay, he doesn't see me yet. So I grunted at him, and he literally like looked over at me, like took one look, licked, like kind of curled his lips and like did like the head bob, and then started walking my direction. And I was like, all right.
It goes that way every time,
right?
right? That's awesome.
So he's coming my direction, but I'm in like full sunlight. So I'm like, if he clears he had to go through a couple little ravines to get to me. I was like, if he clears this edge before I'm like kind of hidden behind a bush or in the shadows at least, like I'm like, he's going to bust out of here. So as soon as he dipped over into the ridge, I like more or less like scrambled up this little hillside to like a tiny little scrub cedar bush. And so I'm sitting next to the cedar bush. I'm ranging all of the other, trees and stuff that are on this hillside. Like, okay, like if he comes over there, that's 32. If he comes over there, that's 19. If he, trying to figure this out. I was like, I think he's going to try to circle downwind of me a little bit. So he should cover, he's probably going to come out right here. You just all three scenarios. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear a snap of a big branch behind me. And so I carefully looked over my left shoulder, and I saw a deer moving up this little draw behind me at he was probably at 40 yards.
Okay.
And behind some trees, but I was like big body, And so I saw him, and so I couldn't turn, I couldn't do a quick turn to the left. I'm left-handed. I couldn't just turn to the left through the bush, so I had to while I'm on my knees, I have to do a full shuffle 180 degrees the other direction. And just as I get squared up with that decoy on my bow, he clears a couple trees and squares off to me. And now he's at I arranged him between the bow and the decoy. I arranged him, and he was already only at 28 yards. And I was like, okay, he's he's close. So drop my rangefinder, clip on, and now this thing is pissed that I'm in his territory. He must have heard me grunting and making scrapes and doing whatever, and now he's coming to kill me. And that is the look on that deer's face was eyes rolled back in his head, fully bristled up, hackled up, just mad. His neck was so big that his neck was wider than his antlers, and he just looked mad. Looks like he's coming in to kill me. So I'm sitting there, and
I've never heard of a whitetail doing that. I know they do, they spar and stuff like that. You hear about elk coming in, drooling and spitting all the time, but I don't often hear about whitetail getting to that point. That's awesome.
Yeah, this thing was just out of his mind. And so he's coming in, and he just starts marching in. He's on a mission to come fight me. And he starts to pause, he's going to... So a lot of times when deer are all hackled up like that, they'll work in kind of quartering to you. It's almost like they're crab walking, and they're trying to posture up and be as big as possible. So he's kind of crab walking towards me, and he pauses, and I draw back as slow as I can, and he paused, and then he was mostly straight on to me, but quartering just a little bit. And I let the arrow fly. It ended up, he was at like 9 yards or something like that when I shot. And
Jeez.
all I saw was the arrow disappear just inside the front shoulder, like, like into the chest cavity. And then he ran off and he ran down into the little drainage I saw him come up out of and up onto the hillside on the other side. And I'm just sitting there like, I was like, I think I hit him, I think I felt good about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would miss it 9 yards. And he runs up and he tips over on the other hillside. And it was like the amount of adrenaline that like dumped out of my body at that point. Like I basically just like fell over backwards on my back, and I was just like laying there staring at the sky. Like, I cannot believe that all just went down right now. Like,
yeah, that's amazing.
That whole, and then I was like, oh, that other deer is like on the way. And so
How many tags do you have?
Just one.
In the
I
state
can only
of
shoot one
happiness?
deer. But I was like, well, I should at least go see if this thing was actually going to like work over to me. And so I just stood up real quick, went to the cedar where I thought he might cross. And sure enough, like had that deer not come in behind me, the one I had originally called at would have shown up 45 seconds later, and I would have shot him at 22 yards or whatever.
Gosh.
But yeah, I went over and recovered the deer, and it ended up being my second biggest deer I've ever killed. So he was he's a true just an 8-point, but he was 158-inch 8-point.
Wow.
So just like absolutely massive antlers and like 12-inch G2s. I mean, just like huge deer. So like to have all that happen,
bigger than the other deer that you originally were going after?
Yeah. Okay. He was quite a bit bigger than the other one.
Okay.
So got it. Yeah, but man, I still like every time I think about that hunt or like see like if I like look at that deer on the wall and think about how that all went down, I just like it still just gets me fired up. Like my heart starts racing, like being right back in that moment. Yeah, way too fun.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm 100 and something episodes into this podcast. No one has told a still hunting whitetail story yet. So that is amazing. And then the fact that you just had like these two beautiful deer coming in from opposite angles, and you kind of get to pick and choose which one you wanted. And I just can't even imagine. I've had a whitetail like stomping at me and at like 40 yards, but he wasn't massive by any means. I can't imagine what that was like to have this huge deer just wanting to kill you 9 yards away.
It was so freaking cool. Like so freaking cool. And then at the time I was still using the bus for deer camp, the old school bus that turned into a rolling hunting shack. And so, was able to get that deer drug out of there and have a gambrels for the front, like bumper hitch, receiver hitch on the bus. And so I got to take a bunch of really cool photos of like this, huge deer hanging from the front of the bus. And like, it's just some stuff that I have like framed up hanging on the wall. It's just, special to me.
That's cool, man. That's a great story. That's a great story. What did the rest of you, I know your brother kind of picked that spot. What did he say when you rolled into camp with that deer?
He was like, well, that's why we come here. It's just, and then, the rest of the week, I'm trying to think, nobody else killed on that trip. But we had some close calls and we learned a lot, like about the area, like so much so that like last year, just my brother and I went back to that area and I ended up shooting a really nice deer on the first night, and not in that same spot, but like just being able to spend, a week then. I think we went back 2 more times, like with the whole group over the years, and then went back alone after a few years. And it was, it's just a cool area. You can get yourself into some big deer, and it was fun
awesome.
to go. Yeah, fun to go explore.
I forgot that it was public land, man. That's even more impressive to get 150 plus inch public land whitetail. I
love it. I love that puzzle. So, yeah,
I bet. Sounds like it. Cool. Well, you said then you had another follow-up story, which was like the whole family with the deer trip. So is that that's not the same trip? That is a different one?
Not the same trip. Yeah. So we
same location or different?
Different location. Also the state of happiness. But we try to we try to do whether it's my dad, my uncle, my brother and I, and then our brother, my brother and I's brother-in-law, our sister's husband, has started to join us now. But on this particular trip, it was just the 4 of us. And so my dad and uncle, they'll get, like I do a lot of the work at this point in my life because I love it. And B, like, it's just, easier for me and easier for them. Like if I'm out hanging cameras and hanging stands and scouting locations and doing all this stuff, and then they get to show up and we all drink coffee together and then go out and hunt, and and so it was just the four of us on this trip, and a day before everybody else showed up, there's a spot where I shot a buck in 2016, and that you have to have a very like particular wind for it. And so I killed in 2016, and then in 2021 I got my dad in there and he killed a deer then, and then it was 2022 and the wind was perfect, like everything was right again. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing this afternoon? And he's like, well, I don't know, I hadn't picked a spot. And I was like, all right, I got a spot for you. So then I drug him in there, got him up the tree, and I was probably gone for maybe 45 minutes. Like I had walked in down this trail with him, got him in the tree, and then I dropped over the bank and kind of walked down this little like really low spot out of there. And I got back, had been hunting hard, and I was like, I just need like a shower and nap, and then I'll go like pick him up when it gets dark. And I got back and I got a text, I think I got one. I was like, what do you mean you think you got one? So I called him, and he's like, I think I hit him good, And so we went back, and that deer ran like 35 yards. It was just thick. So my dad kills the deer. Well, then my uncle shows up the next morning at about 10, and on the same day that my brother was driving. And so my uncle shows up at 10. I was like, all right, I'll go get you in a tree, and then I'm going to go hunt, and then Josh will be here tonight, and then we'll, tomorrow morning it'll be all of us out there hunting. And so went to another spot where I didn't have a stand, but we had a camera in there, and there had been, decent activity in that area. And went in about 12:30, hung a stand. Uncle climbed up in it. I left, hopped in another stand. And then like 45 minutes later, after I was out, like settled in, I got a text from my dad. It was like, is the game cart in the trailer? I was like, yeah. I was like, what happened? He's like, Jeff killed one. I was like, oh, all right. So,
all right.
So I got out of my tree, met him over there. My brother had rolled in at that point. And so we all went in and we pulled my uncle's deer on the game cart and rolled it about 300 yards. Josh climbed into the same tree stand my uncle was in because it was still early in the day. We took a few photos, got his gutted out, got out of there, left. So then I didn't have enough time to go back to another, like the same tree I'd been in earlier. So I just like hopped into this tiny little hole that it is, close to home. And I was like, all right, I could just pop in here tonight. Maybe something will happen. And I had it was sweet. I had a bunch of activity. I had little bucks chasing does around, and had one decoy to me at like 6 yards, like this, little 3x3, and got video of that.
Yeah.
And, just a really cool, like nasty evening, kind of spitting rain and heavy north wind blowing in. And about 45 minutes before dark, Josh sends a text and says, grab that game cart again. And so, so he had shot a deer from the same tree stand that my uncle had earlier in the day. And then,
what?
Yeah, so now we're 3 of 4 already in the trip. And then,
how many days did you have? And this is all like what, day 1.5 at this point?
Yeah, we're at day 1.5. So then, we had. So then it's like I'm the last one with a tag, and like I'm feeling pretty confident at this point. Like I have now done hanging hunts, and my dad killed, and my uncle and brother killed, and so we had this nasty storm roll in that night. Like it was as gross of a storm, like a fall storm as you can get, just blowing 65 miles an hour, raining, and then it got down below freezing, and so everything was just crunch. Like we didn't even hunt the next morning because we were like, it's hard to know like how safe that's actually going to be. So we slept in, kind of assessed like how many, there's lots of branches and trees that had blown down and stuff, and so that night we didn't want to get into a tree because everything had kind of like iced over and snowed over, and it was just like dangerous just to climb up because like lots of stuff was snapping. So we went back to the little hole that I had hunted the night before and got in there, and I did this giant like rattling calling sequence where like I'm running back and forth and breaking branches and stuff, and got back and sat down, and then about a half hour later, this really big deer works into the hole, just like kind of like comes in to check it out, and I get drawn back, and I had that heads up decoy on my bow again, because it allows you to get away with a lot if something comes in and sees you. Yeah. So deer walks in, I draw back. Well, the branch that was above my head that I was sitting under, I didn't realize that the top of that, when I drew, the top of that heads up decoy was pushing against it. And so when I shot, like basically I had down pressure on my bow hand. And so this deer's, I think it was at like 34 yards or something like that. And I drew back and shot. And the down pressure on my hand, I shot just under that thing's brisket. And I was so mad. Like, because that was, probably close to, somewhere in that 150-inch range, just like a really awesome deer.
Yeah.
So, hopes dash, and like the weather continued to get worse and worse. So like, through the next day, like was feeling like pretty down about the whole thing. And then finally decided to like, okay, we're going to give this tree stand a chance and see if we can get in there safely. And my brother hiked in there with me to film it. And that's the worst part. I have that miss on film too, so I couldn't even
you get to relive
not tell anybody about it. Yeah. so then we go and we go into this spot that we call the Rooster. There's pheasants around, so we go into this spot, climb up the tree, and that morning got to have my brother in the tree with me when this awesome 9-point came in, and his antlers were like covered in ice, and like it was snowing lightly that morning, and he chased a doe down in there, and I got drawn back because the doe ran through, and I just figured he'd been chasing her around a little bit, and I figured that he was going to hit that opening and then move, and I was going to have to stop him. And so as he came into the opening, I drew back, and then he stood there facing me, not looking at me, but facing my direction with offering no shot. And I was drawn back for 2 minutes and 25 seconds before he finally turned. Like I was sitting in the tree stand, and I got drawn back, and then I started to shake, and I had to put the bottom cam of my bow on my knee to just stabilize it a little bit. And then when he finally offered me a shot, I had to like basically lean like all the way over off of my tree stand seat because of the snow and the heaviness like of everything. Like it had pushed the boughs down like over like my main shooting lane, and so like I was able to like more or less like hang all the way off the tree stand like pretty recklessly. But I had a safety harness and everything. So but he finally turned and gave me a shot, and I made a good shot, and he ran and died after 50 yards or whatever, and then got the whole gang to come in and help pull this thing out of there. And like so we went 4 for 4 on deer in I guess I ended up taking 4 days to do it, but the first 3 were like a day and a half.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Did you get that?
Pretty fun.
Did you get that like leaning over shot on video too? Your brother was there, right? Did he?
Yeah, my brother was there. He was just focused on the deer, so we don't have the video of me like leaned all the way over. But
that makes sense.
Yeah. I should have had the GoPro running, but I black out when deer start coming in. Like I'm really bad at I'm so bad at self filming. Like a lot of times I'll bring all the camera gear, and then like a deer will come in, and I'm just like focused on the killing, like killing it.
Yeah.
So if I ever do this, I need to like hire a camera guy.
Yeah, right. I've thought about filming, and I'm like, I'm not a good enough hunter to like add anything to the equation. Like, what am I thinking? I'm gonna like start hitting record buttons and stuff like that. No, just try and put the animal down. Like
that's right.
It would be too much for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of extra work. It is fun in like after the fact, like it's a blast, but man, it's a pain a lot of the time. Yeah. But that's how I make a living, so it's all good.
Yeah, it is fun after the fact. My very first elk archery kill was 2 seasons ago, and there was a camera guy there with me. Like,
sweet.
They were like, "Hey, can we film your hunt?" Because I was there with a couple world champion elk callers, and I'm like,
"Okay,
yeah, if you guys are gonna go with me,
absolutely,
yeah, you can do whatever you want. Like, I'll just tag along." And they got a perfect shot where you get me and the elk, and I don't know if you know Jermaine Hodge, but he's all in shot, and you just see my arrow right through the elk because it's got the Luminoc. Yeah. So it's just like you see it show up, and he's trying to focus. He's trying to focus because right behind Jermaine, but eventually he gets it focused, backs up. You see me draw back, lower down, and I'm like, I watch that video weekly, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a good morale boost anytime you're feeling down.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else you mentioned that was cool is like when you first sat in that little hole and you're talking about all the cool animals. It's fun to have those moments in the woods where you make the story, and the story is literally just enjoying what the animals are doing. Mm-hmm. I have one that was just like that. I was elk hunting in Colorado, and I don't have a mule deer tag, but we see a bunch of mule deer on this hillside, and we're just sitting there watching them. And then we see a coyote come in. And we're talking like we're across a canyon. Nothing we do will affect anything that's happening there. And then this coyote starts just going crazy, shooting after these mule deer, and everything's running, and it's going back and forth. And then we hear a gunshot off in the distance, and a herd of like 500 elk came pouring over this mountain. And we were like, holy crap, this is why we do it, just to be here and to see all this wildlife. I had at no point had an opportunity for like the next 3 years after that moment, but being there and just having all those animals do all that cool, fun things like no one's watching is just special. So I'm glad that was part of your story.
Yeah, I mean, getting to watch animals do what animals do is the best part. I mean, obviously filling a tag and all that stuff like that is super awesome, and that's the goal. But if you're not taking the time to soak up all that other stuff, like what's the point? Like if you're just 100%. So driven, on the tag filling side of things, you miss a lot of stuff. And I've been there before. I mean, when you're young and hungry and really trying to make a name for yourself in like both the photo and hunting world, whatever, like there was times where I would catch myself just rushing through stuff and whatever. And man, most of the time, all the best hunts I've ever had, like most successful hunts I've ever had, have been the times when you truly like slow down and kind of like, it's like you're moving with like the woods instead of like trying to conquer them kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just you get into that flow and everything starts working out.
Are you ready to elevate your archery game? Summit Bowstrings delivers premium strings for all archers, crafted with bloodline fiber and BCY material stretched for unmatched consistency. Choose from 3 series: Hunter, Competition, and Summit. Each string is built bison tough with unique techniques for extreme durability and performance. Ideal for both seasoned hunters and target archers. Experienced strings designed to handle any challenge. Visit summitbowstrings.com and use HSP10 for a 10% discount. Yeah, I agree. Another example that I have is like one time I think it was hunting in Hawaii and the sun was rising and I was just seeing spider webs crossing everything and just everything was illuminated in this silver silk. And I was like, this is such a cool moment. And I just like didn't care about anything except just like absorbing this. And then when it was all done, I was like, I think I walked through that. That's gross. I'm probably covered in spider webs. But at the moment, I was just like blown away by just the beauty of this like radiant glow over the entire world. It's very cool.
Yeah.
All right. That's our picturesque moment of the day. You got more stories for us, Sam?
Trying to think. Let's see. I could tell a good one about a hunt that I filmed that like literally everything went wrong. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. I love when things go wrong.
Yeah. Well, this was a comedy
to me.
Comedy of errors.
Okay.
So when I was kind of coming into the industry, I was pretty young in it. I was living in Montana at the time, and I got hired to go up and film a stone sheep hunt in British Columbia, way northern British Columbia, in the Cassiar Mountains. I was young, in shape, willing to do whatever, like go on big adventures, and I did a lot of that. It was, super fun.
Yeah.
I get hired to go up to northern BC, and it's going to be me. And then I was going to be like secondary camera guy. And then there was a main camera guy. And then we had a packer, the guide, and the hunter, the host. And so from the get-go, we started doing things wrong. So we go up there, the Stikine River, which is the river so you can get to camp a couple different ways. So you can go to a town, hop on a float plane, fly into camp, land on the Stikine right at camp. Well, they wanted more adventure, so they pulled their jet boat all the way up there. So then we were going to run 100 miles of the Stikine River and run our way up to camp, which whatever, cool, that's pretty fun. But none of us had ever been on the river. We don't know what it's like. So we pull into the town where everybody's going to do or most of the crew is going to fly in on the float plane. And we're talking to somebody and they're like, you can't run that river. There's a narrows between these two cliffs. And they're like, it's flooded so bad because of all the rain we've had, it's impassable. So I hear that and I'm like, all right. So we booking that float plane, or like what's going on? They're like, no, we'll be all right. So step one, bad decision. Okay, so we dumped the boat in and we're going up, and luckily that Narrows was not nearly as bad as everyone had described. So we kind of like blew through that, no problem. All right, so I'm like, okay, feeling a little more confident. We're good. Well, then we stopped to do a bunch of filming because we needed to film, the jet boat running up the river and, fly do a bunch of different stuff and get more clips for the story. So we stopped and we filmed for like an hour. Well, then we started going again, and, it's getting later in the day. And for anybody that runs jet boats or runs rivers, you don't want to be running a river after dark, especially not like in twilight, because of rapids and rocks, and, you can't read the river, and it's just
plenty of things can go wrong.
Plenty of things can go wrong. So we ran the last like 45 minutes to an hour of that trip, like either in twilight or just flat out, like almost dark. Gosh. And the whole time, like that last hour, my buddy and I, who was the other cameraman, were like, we've got our sleeping bags, we've got tents, like we can even sleep in the boat. We can just anchor up next to shore, and we'll just like bob in the waves, and we'll just sleep for the night. And then we don't have to think about bears, and like let's pull over. This is dumb. Yeah. And he's like, no, we'll make it. So
I'm glad someone on the boat was saying this was dumb.
Yeah.
So the worst things happen when everyone's confident, as long as someone's got a little hesitancy. Yeah. But all right, go ahead.
So we didn't pull over. We just kept going. So we do make it to camp unscathed, and we get there, and the outfitter more or less just yelled at us. He's like, how far did you run? Like, how many miles did you run after twilight? And we were like, oh, it was like, 20 miles or something, 15 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, you had to have gone through like the Crystal Rapids or something. He's like, you can't be doing this stuff. That was so dangerous. You have no idea. So we made it to camp. We sleep for the night. We wake up, and then the next day we aren't going to like real camp until, in the afternoon after we get picked up by the float plane there, fly to a different lake. And so the way that this whole hunt had been painted to us was we were going to show up. I was going to be the main camera guy after we got there. My buddy was going to stay back and do a lot of like story building at the camp, and then he was going to get flown out. But then the outfitter was going to be flying the area with the plane. And then when they found a band of rams or whatever, they were going to try to, they had a few like landing strips around, and so they were like, they would pick us up, fly us within however long, and then you have to wait like it's like 12 hours until the next day. And then we'd hike in and try to shoot a ram. Well, when we got there, his plane was broken, and so that was out of the question. And so instead we got on a float plane, flew to a lake, and then we were supposed to take this. We had an Argo because we had so much gear to try to film, like really document this whole trip. So I alone had a Sony EX1, a Sony FS700, and a Canon 5D Mark III, tripod, batteries, the whole thing, plus all my camp and food. So my pack was like 80-ish, 85 pounds. And then I had a camera in each hand. And so, but the plan was, okay, we've got this Argo that'll take us to our first spike camp. And so we can load that up with all the gear, and then you're not carrying all that much. Well, they're like, oh yeah, the Argo trail's easy. It's marked by pink, like the pink flagging tape.
Okay.
Well, the Argo trail hadn't been used in, I don't know, 3 years or whatever. So everything's completely overgrown. So we left. We stayed over camp at this little like on the lake camp for a night. We got up, got everything packed in the Argo, took off. We started moving at it was like 7 a.m. And by the time we stopped that night, we set the tents up at midnight. So, yeah. So
how many miles? Okay,
not enough. Not enough in 17 hours. We got to the point, like we couldn't find the trail, kept missing the trail. There was old moose, packing moose trail that were flagged with the same tape. And so, we ended up going up over this ridge with the Argo, which was crazy dangerous. And two of us were on the bottom side, so it didn't flip. And it was just like the whole thing was an absolute, cluster. So, I forgot. That morning, the outfitter almost died because he hopped on his four-wheeler to run an Argo tire down to the dock. and the Argo tire fell off the four-wheeler, and so he tried to cut it off with the four-wheeler. Like the Argo tire was rolling ahead of him, so he started to go. So he tried to cut it off with the four-wheeler. He caught a tire over the bank that went down to the river and rolled off this 20-foot bank, got rolled over on by the four-wheeler, and, basically came back up the hill like completely beat up, like limping real bad. And I was pretty sure he broke something in his hand. And so that was how that morning before started. Anyway, so we
feeling confident in this outfitter too, right? Broken plane, just broken plane, crashes. Yeah, pretty confident. Money well spent.
Yeah. So then, like food rations, like obviously they give you all the food and whatever, and so it was like our daily food ration was like a Mountain House, and then a candy bar, a fruit snack, a Cliff Bar. I mean, it was just not very much for like. For the amount of effort putting in. So who you said they? They is the people organizing the film or the outfitter? No, the outfitter. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So then we fly in, we meet the guide, we get in the Argo. 17 hours later or whatever, we're setting up the tents. We slept, we got up, we went over, and we thought we glassed a nice big ram. Thought we'd found it. Like we just kind of sat on it all day, and didn't end up putting eyes on it again. And so we're like, all right, well, I still have the map. It's this old black and white topo map. And, there's like a couple little dashes on it. And it's like, well, the spot we were trying to get, they were calling the Cathedral. And so like we took off the next day to try to get to that and like work through. And so, all right, back down the mountain into the bog, and then back up the mountain, and then back down, and then back up, and all the while carrying, tons of weight. Tons of, all that stuff.
Not getting enough calories.
So that night we got to this spot. Well, then at this point it had been like, I don't know, a couple days in or whatever. So the plan was we were going to bring in a light load of food, and then they were going to do a food drop. And so we get to the top where we're going to camp. They fly over with the plane, do a food drop, and the host and my buddy go down to grab the food. Well, we had spotted a grizz. Well, then when those guys were walking down there, the grizz sees them and stands up on its hind legs. And I got video of it sprinting at the host and my buddy. And, they're yelling at it and everything. Well, then thankfully, they hunt grizz up there. So the bear circled downwind of them, caught wind that it was humans. And then that thing just like barreled off. But, not before that got within like 25 yards at full speed.
Yeah. No thanks.
And I'm watching this from like 400 yards away going, this... It's going to be interesting. See how this plays out. So luckily, did not get actually charged by a grizz, and then
God, it's terrifying.
Yeah, and then
the episode right before this was a guy who just like in August got charged by a bear, and him and his dad shot it swatted him, but it hit the frame on his pack, knocked him over. He gets his pistol out and just unloads. His dad unloads. And
God!
The after effect, the bear did die, but he ended up shooting himself in the leg.
He was the one. There was a clip of him like explaining that on Peterson's, right? Like on social. Yeah.
Yep. He keeps getting it. He keeps getting taken down, but I got him on the podcast to tell the whole story, and it is insane.
That is wild. I actually. My comment on that post is the most liked comment on that post, which was, you can hear the clanging of his giant steel balls all the way in the lower 48.
Yes. Yes, you can.
The way, like, I don't know if he was in shock or whatever, but the way he was explaining the whole scenario, like in just like very, like, no, like emotion.
I called him out on that. I'm like, dude, you are cool as a cucumber during this entire thing. Apparently his dad is a retired like game warden. So like his dad was the perfect person to be there, knew everyone. He was messaging people specifically, not just hitting the panic button on the OnReach.
Right.
He was like a firefighter up there in Alaska. So like these guys are, like you said, steel balls, man. Steel balls. Man. But that story was insane.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's good. So then this video of this stone hunt is actually out there in the world. Like, so it's like an episode of Steve's Outdoor Adventures. And so we had gotten like a 5-day food drop that day. And there's a clip of me doing inventory of all the food, because once it was there, I had gone through and done inventory on everything, and then be like, all right, we're good for 5 days. Well, then we were 2 days later, we still hadn't killed a sheep, hadn't seen a sheep, I did like another inventory on everything, and I was like, we got a 5-day food drop. It's only been 2 days, and we were down to like a day and a half of food.
Please don't tell me the outfitter was eating extra.
The outfitter was not. It was a combo of. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. It was a combo of things, but
yeah.
So we're like, okay, now we're low on food. Like, great, we've already been, burning lots of calories, and so then we made another move. We finally made it to this place called the Cathedral. We did run into a band of sheep. It was young rams, like sickle horn rams, and then some ewes and stuff. And so didn't end up seeing a legal ram. Had to this is just like, I'm doing this kind of fast, but it's just like, this was days and days and days. So we, over the course of a 12-day hunt, we ended up hiking roughly somewhere between 100 and 120 miles. I lost 18 pounds. And 2 days left in the hunt. We got weathered in and ran out of food and jet boil fuel. so we couldn't cook anything, and all we had, I think there was one whole day that the only thing I had was a Cliff Bar.
Jesus.
And so then we finally decided, this trip's just not going to happen. So we're going to hike back to where we had very first camped, and then we'll spend the night, and then from there we'll hike back down to the lake, and then we'll get out of here.
Get the hell out of there.
Yeah. So we took off, and we're trying to plan a route. We've got about, I don't know how many miles it was back to our first camp where we had stashed some things and left the tent and whatever. And quite a ways. But we were trying to plan a route, and I was like, okay, if we, I'm looking at the terrain going, if we shoot down this ridge, I think we can just find a moose trail, along this creek. And then we can work, all the way to that little gully that we need to go up and over. Well, I got outvoted, and so we ended up boulder hopping, these giant, Volkswagen-sized boulders for all day, trying to get across this thing. And we get we're like, well, we don't want to lose elevation. So then what do? We ended up losing all the elevation anyway to get around through this giant boulder field. And looking from that little gully, look back and be like, oh yeah, you can see the moose trail that we could have taken all the way from the bottom
just
of that
walked
ridge.
Here.
So it would have been 1/3 the time, but that, whatever. So we didn't even make it back to our main camp. All of a sudden it's 2 a.m, and we're like, screw it, we're just gonna sleep. So we rolled out the sleeping bag, slept under the stars, woke up. It was pretty cool. We had some mountain goats right above us. That was really, kind of a cool way to cap off the trip. And then made it back to camp the next morning, packed everything up, bailed off, got back to the Argo, and then the Argo broke down and had to repair that. And then, anyway, by twilight that evening, a little before that, we got back to the log cabin or on the beach. And, I found they had some fishing rods in there, and I found I cobbled together a jig and an old swimming body, and I went and caught 3 or 4 trout in the lake. And then so we got to eat trout cooked over the fire, because the only thing else we had was mountain houses.
An amazing meal.
It was the best fish that I think any of us have ever eaten. It was unbelievable.
I believe it.
But yeah, I lost 18 pounds.
12 days. That is crazy. Do you mind if I ask, what's your normal carrying weight? So, put it 18 in perspective.
So at the time, I think I was running. I was typically around 205, 210 pounds, somewhere in there. So I was in the low 190s after the trip, and the host of the show lost 35 pounds.
He probably had more to lose, though.
He did, yeah. And I mean, he had broken a foot earlier in the summer. Got stepped on by a horse, and so he's up there. Yeah, and it was a wild trip. But now, I lived through it. I have this awesome story from that trip. I honestly didn't want to go back on another sheep hunt for a long time, and I didn't until I went and filmed I filmed Jason Matzinger a couple years ago on his Dall's sheep hunt. Which was a blast, and
hopefully it went a little bit better from the get-go.
Oh, it was such a different story. It was so different. Yeah, we had a great time. Yep, he ended up killing a 12-year-old ram on day 9, and it was sweet.
Imagine this. You're deep in the wilderness. The sun is rising, casting golden light over rugged terrain. Your heart races as you navigate through the backcountry, knowing the perfect shot could come at any moment. This is where memories are made and stories are born. Ultralight rifles are often seen as Mountain West guns, but the Ridgeline FFT from Christensen Arms breaks that mold. This stellar, lightweight rifle is your perfect companion, whether you're in the backcountry or box blind, ensuring you never have to switch between your builds. With its aero-grade carbon fiber barrel and stock, the Ridgeline FFT is incredibly lightweight, yet powerful. Thanks to its innovative side baffle brake, it reduces recoil even on a 5-pound gun shooting magnum calibers. It's like black magic. As a sub-MOA tack driver made in America, the Ridgeline FFT is for those who seek the thrill of the hunt and the joy of storytelling. Picture yourself returning to camp, Ridgeline FFT in hand, ready to share the day's adventures. Head to your local shop, pick one up. You've got to feel this rifle to believe it. Let the Ridgeline FFT be part of your hunting stories and the legacy you pass down. That's amazing, man. Yeah, it's funny how the stories were like literally nothing goes right. And like if you were to talk about doing it ahead of time and ending up that way, you'd be like, I'm not going to go. Just screw that.
Yeah,
like that's
absolutely.
There's nothing about that I want to go. Now it's like this fond memory of just huge suck that you endured for 12 days. So it's funny. It's funny how it works out that way.
Yeah.
But Sam, man, we're running out of time, and I want to be respectful of your time. So let's do a couple things. Why don't you tell the people? I mean, if you have more than you want to talk about than just the Stamp It Forward project, we can talk about whatever you want to, because I have time. But if that's all you want to talk about, we'll just do that.
Perfect. Yeah. So one of the initiatives, so Public Land Tees, we started it with the mission to give back to the organizations who actually have boots on the ground every single day, and they're fighting for more public land, more access, better habitat, like basically protecting all the things that we enjoy. And so when we started, we decided that $5 from everything we sell on the website, we will donate back to different initiatives. And so started doing that from day one. But one of the, we've tried to incorporate kind of bigger projects in among that. And so one of the things that we started doing in 2019 is called the Stamp It Forward project, which revolves around more or less leveraging a conservation tool that's already in place, which is the duck stamp. And for anybody that doesn't know, 98% of the purchase price of a duck stamp has to be spent on wetland conservation. So if you are over the age of 16 and want to waterfowl hunt, you have to buy one, but anybody can buy one. You don't have to be a member of anything. You don't have to have a hunting license. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can just buy a duck stamp and know that 98% of that will be spent on the National Wildlife Refuges, conservation easements, more. They have what's called the Small Parcel Acquisition Act, which is started in, I believe it was in the 50s as part of the duck stamp program. But what they do is they buy parcels of land which have good grassland habitat, good grassland and wetland habitat for breeding. In the prairie pothole region is where a lot of that money goes. But they buy chunks, and then that's actually open to the public for hunting. So it's good for ducks, it's good for pheasants, it's good for deer, and it has opened up a ton of access in the prairie pothole region, where 70% of the ducks end up breeding anyway. No. But yeah, so we started Stamp It Forward, and the first couple of years, we literally just asked people to send us money and then spent all of it on duck stamps. And then once we get a big stack, we start giving the stamps away with every single item we sell on the website. And so year one, we bought 1,000 stamps. Year two, we bought like 1,600 stamps. Year three was like 12 or 1,300. Year 4 and 5, we made it over. Year 4, we did 2,000 stamps. It took all fall. Like we got the last big donation from Shields Outdoors for like $15,000. We got that in December, and that pushed us over the top. And then last year, we put a little twist on it, and I actually did a 100-mile, called it the Duck Ruck, but did a 100-mile walk over 3 days, started in North Dakota, hiked into South Dakota, ended at a National Wildlife Refuge, which I was only born about 30 miles from, and as a way to earn people's donations. And then we did a little over 2,000 stamps again last year, and then this year was fully prepped to do another 100-mile hike, had kind of a big, kind of a big marketing deal with it. Had a fairly large name, going to come walk some miles with me and then do a hunt together or whatever. Well, then I, like an idiot, tore my Achilles in June. And so I had surgery at the end of June, and a 100-mile walk was way out of the question for me this year. Yeah. So, but it's been fun. There's been people all over the place that have been going out and doing a little walk and helping raise dollars. And right now we're at $27,700 raised for duck stamps. So that's about a little over 1,100 stamps.
Yeah.
And to know that 98% of that by law has to be spent on more wetlands just means that there's, it not only helps migratory birds, but it helps survive 700 different species
that's awesome.
That rely on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been a fan for a long time. I'm not even a waterfowl hunter. I want to. I just don't.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a barrier to entry to me in Colorado. Like, you gotta reserve locations. You need decoys. Right. So someone gave me some decoys, which is amazing. And last year I went and actually shot my first duck.
Sweet.
But using one of the stamps, because I bought not this shirt, a different one. I don't remember which one, but 3 different times I've purchased a shirt, got the stamp, and then I actually purchased my own stamp and then gave that to a friend because I'm
Sweet.
like, let's just keep giving it out.
Yep.
But man, it's great what you guys are doing. Off subject, how'd you tear your Achilles? I've done that. It sucks.
Oh, you have done that? Yeah, it's not fun. But I was down at Vortex they were running us through like pistol training. And so we were doing moving handgun drills, and it was just a simple, like, shoot twice, run forward 10 yards, shoot again. And I shot twice, went to run forward, and just snap. Yep. And just it felt like I stepped all the way through the concrete. And next thing I know, I was down, face down, and thankfully I didn't shoot myself or anybody else. Had good finger control over the trigger. And that was, had finger up on the slide, so didn't mess that up. But yeah, just, and in the moment I was like, I think I tore my Achilles. And then I went to the ER.
Pretty quick realization, huh? You're like,
yeah, but I went to the ER.
Like, what the hell was that? And then immediately you're like, I know what that was, like within 10 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was it. And then I went to the ER and they told me I had not torn my Achilles.
What?
And yeah, right? They did like the test or whatever, and my foot must have moved just a little. And so she's like, I think you just tore your calf muscle. So I walked on it for 4 days. And then I went and saw an ortho, and he was like, oh, no, you 100% full rupture. So
okay. Jesus.
Yeah, so then I got in for surgery. Went in on Monday, saw the ortho, got in for surgery on Thursday, and had that fixed up. So now the 27th will be 4 months post-op. So it's getting a lot better, but it's just
so takes you're off forever. Crutches, because that was like 3 months. So you're in a boot now.
Slowly. Nope, so I'm let's see, I was non-load bearing for 2 weeks, and then I was in a walking boot so started with crutches with a walking boot, and then out of that, so in a walking boot for about 8 weeks. And so I have been walking in shoes since then, but like literally just like in the last 2-3 weeks, like I can navigate stairs a lot better. Like anytime I go in the woods, I'm still throwing the walking boot on because there's like risking re-injury is not going to happen.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It was funny is I ruptured it, I want to say it was like right before Thanksgiving. And so I was healed up and ready to go for the next elk season when I was in Washington that year.
Yeah.
My buddy, we saw some elk and he's like, let's run up this mountain. And he starts running up. I'm like, no, I'll go around the mountain. Like I just can't. It's
right.
It's a slow recovery.
Yeah.
All right. That was a side trip there. Okay. Sam, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, and we'll wrap this thing up, man.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to follow along with anything that I'm doing or we're doing, just follow my Instagram, which is at Sam Soholt, or our Public Land Tees, which is at Public Land Tees. We also have the Soholt Brothers YouTube channel that we put a little bit out on, not nearly enough, but yeah, it's pretty easy to find us. So yeah, either Perfect, my page or the Public Land Tees page, and we'll just keep doing what we can to push forward the conservation initiatives.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And I will put links to all that stuff in the show notes as usual.
Cool.
Make it easy to find. Sam, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate it. It was great to meet you. Hey, and if you're ever in the Colorado area, you'll probably visit your brother at some point. Let me know, and I'd be happy to buy you a beer or something.
Absolutely. I like that. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I do want to thank Sam, of course, for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure to meet him. Loved hearing his stories. And like I said, I've been a big fan of his for a long time. So thank you, Sam. I really do appreciate you. For you listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. Man, I also appreciate you guys. If you can, get on the whatever app you're on, whatever you're listening to, and go and review the podcast, and then share it with one person. That way we can just share the love, get more people hearing it, and more people with crazy stories reaching out to me. But that's it, guys. Thank you again. I appreciate you all. Now get out there and make some stories of your own.